Now we have spoken about retention, how equity compensation or LTI works around retention. We are moving into the second primary or main objective which a company looks at, which is performance. So we have a peer-to-peer discussion on this topic. The participants in this panel would be Superna Shanker, Vice President Human Resource at Infosys. Hi, Superna. We have Subhalakshmi Ganguly, Executive Vice President and Head of Compensation and Benefits at HDFC Bank. We have Yeshwinder Patial, Senior Director Human Resources at JSW MG Motors India Private Limited. And the session would be overall moderated by Lakshman Gupta, who is our co-founder and CEO at Qapita. So I think over to you, Lakshman. I think you have a presentation. So Amit, we can pull up the slides.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Lakshman. I'm co-founder at Qapita. Today I have privilege of hosting this panel on a very crucial topic on are the performance-based options working. Performance-based options or PEPs now become the staple diet of compensation strategies to align the employee contributions with their company's business goals. As we delve into this subject, we'll explore the effectiveness, challenges, and also the nuances of the implementation in the organizations of varying scales. Before introducing our esteemed panelists, I'd like to set the stage by sharing some insights from the recent studies and trends in the performance-based options. Can you put up the slides? So the performance conditions, that primarily two types of performance metrics. One is the market conditions, which is market capitalization or the market cap in the listed companies, or TSR or the total shareholder return or the relative TSR. And the other than market conditions such as the earning per share EPS, revenue goal, customer satisfaction, operating margin, cash flows, or the IPO target. While the expectation is that the PEPs will drive the business success, align the incentives, and motivates the employees to prioritize the long-term success and also align with the shareholder expectations. The challenges are that sometimes the employees feel that the goals are unreachable. There's a big gap in the communication and education to the participants, and there's a lot of complexity in the administration of the PEPs. Next slide. Our recent surveys show is that the performance equity are constantly on the rise year after year. Listed companies and unlisted companies, both of them are preferring performance-based to the time-based, and most of them are giving performance-based or a combination of performance and time-based. And in terms of US, we see that more than 50% of the US public companies give some form of the performance equity programs. So these trends indicate that the performance-based are a rise, but however the question remains, are they delivering the intended impact? So that's what we will dwell now. So now I'll introduce the panelists so that basically they will help us answer this question. And now we have an incredible panel of industry leaders bringing a wealth of experience. The first is Superna Shanker. She is the Vice President of Human Resources at Infosys, known for her work in shaping the large-scale employee reward programs in Infosys over the last several years. We have Subhalakshmi Ganguly, Executive VP and Head of Compensation Benefits at HDFC, with her deep expertise in designing the impactful equity plans. And we have Yeshwinder Patial, who is the Senior Director of Human Resources at JSW MG Motors, who has an extensive experience in linking equity with the performance conditions and one of the companies who have implemented broad-based equity for all the employees in the company. So please join me in welcoming this distinguished panelists. So we structured this panel in three parts. First, we'll set the context. Second part, we'll deep dive into the crucial aspects of the performance equity plans. And third part, we'll seek key takeaways from each of the panelists. So starting off with setting the context, I would like to request each of you to give an understanding of your organization approach to the performance-based plans, and if each of you could share a recent performance-based plan implemented at your company. Starting with Superna.
Okay, since I'm the first, I would like to thank Abhishek for the trivia. And I'm just going to step back and give a little context. I mean, he said that Infosys was among the first Indian companies to issue stock options to its employees, right? It created the first salaried millionaires in that sense. So stock option is a very integral part, has been a very integral part of Infosys journey, right? We got listed in NASDAQ in 1999. We stopped giving stock options to our employees in around 2001. And we had an inflection in our journey in 2014 when we had our first non-co-founder CEO join us. We reintroduced or reignited the entrepreneurial spirit within Infosys by reintroducing stock plans then. It was simply said, it was called the 2015 Stock Incentive Plan. And under the leadership of our current CEO and MD, Mr. Salil Parekh, we did a 2.0 of our stock incentives. This is called, and we introduced a pure performance stock unit plan, right? The real spirit of it was really, it was built on the spirit of meritocracy, which was created or established by our founders. It's called the Expanded Stock Ownership Program. The intent of it was really democratizing wealth. So the opportunity of wealth creation for our leadership team, but also future set of leaders. And most importantly, it was about creating performance-focused co-owners of Infosys growth in that sense, right? And it was aligned to, in that sense, from a shareholder value creation perspective. So we really introduced the performance stock unit plan for our employee base, right at the executive leadership level, to reward grants at levels below in 2019. So the journey has been, and we have been giving grants year on year. So that's briefly from my side.
So I think you moved from the RSUs to performance-based more to improve them, to encourage the meritocracy. Is that
Yes.
the key point?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
From a time-based to the performance-based.
So our stocks are, it's a 3-year vesting period, and it's really about driving the enterprise behavior within the organization. So that's intent.
Thanks. Subhalakshmi.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, compared to Infosys, I must say that HDFC Bank is not far behind, and we heard Louis speaking about it. And I must say that, the performance-based equity plans, or, that's probably a recent nomenclature of that. But the reward itself is very intrinsic, whether we term it performance-based or not as such. Because when the appreciation of the stock price happens, it's intrinsically rewarding performance. And the group of individuals who have created the bank, I must say that they have together built an institution, and they have been the beneficiaries. And when we talk about, the mercenaries versus the people who contribute, I think it's a beautiful mix of both. And the contribution is what you see today. And obviously, it has helped them create the wealth for themselves as well. Now, the stock option plan continues today. We have introduced restricted stock units, which is actually performance-based. The stock options are not yet performance-based equity plans. And the middle management to senior management, they are extended stock options. And middle management to junior management are extended performance-based equity plans. Now, which is your restricted stock units. And as per the regulatory guidelines, which is the Reserve Bank of India for a bank, in 2020, ESOPs were costed by the bank, which means the bank had to pick up the cost. And that kind of changed a bit the approach towards equity plan design for the bank. And it was a bit generous earlier. Now it is more market linked in terms of market linked. When I say, I mean market benchmarked. So we have moved a bit from a very generous plan to a little more moderately generous plan. And the design thinking is still on in terms of how to make it more attractive, because the share prices have been a bit stagnant of late. and more to come when we see the designs get approved by the NRCs.
Thanks so much.
Good afternoon. I think with Infosys and HDFC, we are far behind. We've just entered 7 years back, but the thought process, let me tell you, it is the ESOP plan which came up, which we thought for our employees, is taken from what Infosys did, what HDFC did, and what similar other organizations, large organizations in India thought about. Now, MG is known for disrupting market, and this is a thought which was there with our earlier CEO, now CEO Emeritus Rajiv Chhabra, that when we think about giving ESOPs, it has to be for each and every employee of the organization. We entered into a joint venture with JSW, and the thoughts of Rajiv Chhabra and JSW Group, our chairman, Mr. Sajan Jindal, both were completely aligned. Both the leaders had the same thought process that wealth creation is something which we have already done. But what about all the people who are working with us, who are making day and night these vehicles for us so that we generate more wealth? Aren't they deserving something more than their regular salaries? And that's where this ESOP for each and every employee working with the organization, it got stamped. I mean, the thought process with both of them was there. As we entered into it, we said, yes, ESOP has to be there. We don't care about what others think about it, but we should be doing this. Performance, of course, as we look about growth in the industry, being one of the newest member in the Indian automotive industry, it is important for us to lead and create that benchmark. So it has to be performance driven, because we heard in the morning as well that there's no substitute to hard work. So, and what does hard work, smart work, whatever we may call it, how does that pay off?
Yeah.
It has to be linked to performance. And that's how the entire framework of performance-driven ESOP scheme came up at JSW MG.
Thank you all for sharing your perspective from your organization, each individual organization level. So let's go a little bit deep dive into this, and let's explore some critical aspects of this PEPs in your respective organizations. I have some suggested areas which you can cover. If this cover whichever maybe you feel the relevant. One is the design challenges. How easy or is it difficult to design a realistic PEP? Second one is the shareholder and NRC perceptions, and how do the stakeholders view the effectiveness of PEPs. Third is more critical, the employee clarity. Are employees clear about the performance metrics they are evaluated on, and how do you ensure the transparency? Is there any role-specific effectiveness? Are PEPs more effective than the sales or non-sales roles, or executive versus non-executive roles? Then short-term versus long-term impact. Do you feel PEPs encourage short-term behavior, or they are effective in creating the long-term value? And the last, the critical, which everyone is designing this, is for the success measurement. How does your organization measure the success of these plans in terms of both employee satisfaction and also the company performance? So these are quite a few areas. Just would like you to see which one you would like to cover it, each of you, and you can go. Superna.
Lakshman, you have asked so many questions and so your first question was
Design challenge.
design challenges, right? I think design is really, really critical, and that irrespective of whether it is a performance stock unit plan or any other plan, stock plan. I think the design is most critical, right? And setting priorities and aligning right from the executive leadership team to the CEO to the NRC and the board, and ultimately landing it for shareholders' approval is really quite a journey, and it really takes many months, probably a year and over, right? So setting priorities to my mind really comes first, and from a performance stock unit measure perspective, I think it's both an art and a science, if I may so. It's an art because it's really about coming up with metrics that aligns with the company's strategy. So really being able to articulate the metrics that really resonates with the company's culture and also with the company's strategic priorities. And it's a science because the measures have to be very clear and transparent. Right? And from a fairness and a transparency perspective, it has to be a very clear science from a measurability perspective. So that's my really short take on the whole thing.
Anything on the shareholder and NRC?
To my mind, PSUs are easier to get through from a shareholder perspective. From an NRC perspective, it takes a long time to decide on the metrics and the measurability. So we took a long time from there on. But from a shareholder perspective, because the shares vest on performance conditions, right? So it's fairly clear. For us, it's really 3 metrics. For us, it is TSR. You had it there. So it is TSR on peer group companies. So total shareholder returns on peer group companies. So it's relative TSR around that. Relative TSR on indices, right? So we have S&P, Nifty 50 and MSCI. So on indices, and the third measure for us really is our operating metrics. So revenue margin and digital revenue growth. So operating metrics and relative TSR on peer group companies and also on indices. So that's where it is.
And on employee communication and clarity with employees, are they clear about the aspects?
Lakshman wants everything. I think the crux of PSUs or any stock plan being effective is really communication has to be underscored 1,000 times, or 1,000,000 times. It starts right from the time you give a grant. So we really make it special for our employee base, right from a note that goes from a CEO's desk to a customized communication. We really give a write-up to our managers to speak to the employees. So really, really about making it special for our employee base. At the executive leadership level, it's very clear-cut. They understand it. But at the levels below, it's really for us a reward grant. So we make it really, really explicit in that sense. The second piece is the parameters on which stocks vest, right? And I spoke about complete parameters about it. People understand it because it's very transparent in that sense, and you can actually look at the stock price and measure the whole piece and where you stand against those indices. And our share plan, if you just Google it, it's out there and all the metrics are out there. But you do get a host of queries if your vesting is not at target. Yeah. And that is really, really, so no matter how much you communicate, if people find the shares are not vesting at target, you do get a lot of queries, and you have to address those queries in a matter of fact manner, right? So that's always there, but I would essentially say that communication is absolutely important. And managers in a large organization like us, it's really the leaders and the managers to own a lot of those. Communication is also very, very important. And consistent language in what you communicate and say. Yeah.
Thanks. Subhalakshmi.
So, out of my several years of experience in Comp and Ben, this is the third organization where I'm closely working on equity plans. 2 of them have been multinationals in a different industry segment, and this is the bank. Now, what I had seen a common thread in all these companies is the considerations while designing the equity plans. And I'll bring to your attention to a nice book that I read, and if possible, please read it. It's called The Zone to Win. It's by a gentleman called Jeffrey Moore. And he very beautifully, and it's a workshop that I attended in one of my previous organizations, very beautifully he classified the phase of the organization in 4 quadrants. And he spoke about a performance zone where there is like a steady flow of revenue and a steady flow of profit. It's kind of a self-sustaining mode. Then there is a productivity zone where companies talk about how to increase efficiencies and all of that, in operational efficiencies, in resource efficiencies, putting in systems and processes. Then there is a transformation zone where companies really have to reinvent to be relevant in the industry. And then there is an incubation zone where you set up certain business units. It's more like a startup. And in my previous organization, I was privy, because it was a multi-business organization, and each business group was actually we could classify them into all these 4 zones. The interesting part was how to design an equity plan for the top leadership, which cut across all these zones and all these business units. Say, for example, supply chain. It literally cuts across all these zones, right? Because it's a horizontal or a finance or a HR functions. So the challenge was, what could be the performance metrics that could apply to all of these? Or should we have different performance metrics that could serve the purpose of each of these business units? And I would say it's very important to consider which phase in the business life cycle a company is in to determine the performance metrics, because what clicks in a certain life stage doesn't always click in a certain other life stage. And that's exactly what we are facing now in HDFC Bank, because we are no more a startup. We are growing, no doubt, but we are not a startup organization anymore. There is no low base effect, right? So how do we do design thinking that creates wealth, at the same time drives the performance? And typically, coming to the NRC point, NRC is very interested to look at the total shareholder return. Certain operational metrics are also there, which is ROA and ROE. And then it goes down to the business level performance, which is primarily at this point in time addressed through a short-term incentive plan, not a long-term incentive plan. But the challenge to design is, at times what happens, when we look at a long-term incentive plan, at the same time, there are, I won't say conflicting, but equally important priorities that you have to address in the short term. So the design has to be that both are existing side by side and through different instruments. If ESOP is not working because probably share price is not appreciating so much, let's look at RSUs. Let's look at something which is a mix probably. Or we extend the performance period. We make a cliff vesting if we want to really drive very important parameters which say will fulfill 3 years down the line. So you can't have every year vesting because that drives the focus away. So all of these considerations are very important for a plan to be successful. Communication, absolutely key. But trust me, at a senior management level, everybody understands it. They understand it very well. And the only difference, I would say, at some points in time, there will be geopolitical reasons where, there will be impact. Not, it will not probably grow the share price so much that we expect. But the health of the organization is absolutely fine. So those are the challenges that we need to keep in mind. At a junior management level, they don't influence the outcome, but they are beneficiaries of the outcome. So communication in both ways is very key. How we can influence the outcome, which is a separate tune or tone of communication to the senior management level, versus how you can benefit from the outcome, which is the tone at a junior management level.
You covered So just we were also discussing earlier. So at the time of the grant, there is expectation that this is the value the employee will get after 3 or 4 years. The plan is designed, but by the time the actual vesting happens, based on various market forces or geopolitical forces or various reasons, it doesn't happen, and the value
Yes.
what the employees expect is not happening. What are the things which you guys look at to make it full or make, apart from the things which you already mentioned about?
Yeah, see, I mean, there are both ways to look at it. If we are not able to do anything from the management side or from the HR side, management is not the right word. It's not management. Everybody owns a part of the companies. Everybody is a management here. But what we say, okay, when things were good, it's a variable pay at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
When things were good, everybody reaps the benefit. And things are bad, it's a risk that we take. It's a risk versus return. So how do we communicate the philosophy is very important. It's not only people have to look for gain.
Yeah.
I mean, there are losses, there are variabilities, right? It's also important how we lay down the performance metrics so people really can relate to what is intended
Right.
as an outcome and how much it'll, say, a pool.
Yes.
If the targets exceed by, say, 10%, you get, say, 20% more from a return point of view. Say, just an allocation point of view.
Yes.
Finally, at the end of the day, the return is, there are certain external forces. But the communication can, to a certain extent, manage that. If it is a prolonged problem, then we have to look at rethinking of the design. The instruments, I would say.
And that's what you mentioned. You keep on looking at
Correct.
redesigning.
Correct. Correct.
Yes. Hence.
So I think for us, if I have to talk about planning, the design was rightly said earlier by Superna also. The toughest part, because we are an unlisted company. We only know about our performance, and only we know about it. Rest of the market knows only about what are the numbers in terms of sales,
Number of vehicles and
number of vehicles sold. So we know our performance. And think about it, the plan design should be such, because everything goes in the design, that when you communicate about this to the employees, right from the top to the last person on the shop floor, everybody should be able to understand it. So
And how do you communicate to the shop floor?
I'll come to that, because
Yes.
that was one of the most interesting parts.
Yes.
So designing did take a huge amount of time. Of course, we not being the experts, get into consultation with experts, take their views, add to the complications. We also have to make sure that two major shareholders, SAIC, JSW, they have to be aligned. JSW, since it is Indian regulation, we do understand. The other larger shareholder is SAIC. So what are the regulations going out in Shanghai? Those needs to be understood. We were finally able to do that thing. Major part, and which right from the morning we have been hearing, is the communication part.
The communication is.
And let me tell you, it was more easy for me to communicate and make people on the shop floor understand,
Oh, that is okay.
as compared to the engineers, the management graduates in the organization.
Or is it because of expectation, too much expectation?
Expectations is one thing. Second thing is, if you look at the automotive industry, typically the talent moves within the automotive industry. Majority of the talent. There are certain talents which move cross industry as well. But there are only two companies in India which are listed. Third company joined it. Listed, sorry, let me reframe it. There are only two companies which offer stock options in the passenger vehicle segment. So most of the employees, majority, would not understand what is ESOP. I had an employee who made sure that employee attended each and every session. And after attending 15-20 sessions, the person comes back with the basic question. One question which is the basis. Why should I pay? I said, how will you own it? If I have something, if you would like to own it, notional kuch to dena padega. Company will not give you anything free of cost. If it is free of cost, it's nothing. So you'll have to pay something to the company to get it. It can be 1 rupee. You may get something worth 100 rupees, 1000 rupees, pay me 1 rupee. But then if I'm paying you something, that's mine. I said, of course, that is yours. That is why the options will be given to you when when you exercise these options. Now, we made sure that none of these sessions which we do to the employees are done virtually. Okay. Each and every employee is covered into face-to-face interaction and has the option that I would like to join another session, you're open. And of course, follow-up sessions virtual. On the shop floor was more important. Our operations are in Gujarat. In Gujarat, two things are there, which I've spent a long time in Gujarat. One, the moment a child is born, the first thought starts in home is passport bana lo. That's where it starts. And second, the moment a child turns 18, the first thing they do is open a demat account. So, what shares are, I probably on the floor, people knew more than me. But at least on what shares mean. But yes, making them understand ESOP scheme. Let us understand one thing when we talk about wealth. Wealth may mean different to different people. For somebody, even 1 crore is not a wealth. For somebody, even 1 lakh is wealth. So, telling them wealth, difference from the basics, difference between money and wealth. That was the basics. Sessions out on the floor went longer, very long, and we made sure that there's no end time to it. They're completely in free flow. Let all the questions be answered. The crux lies in doing follow-up sessions, because whatever is spoken at that point of time, people will understand. The moment they go back home, because they would like to share. अच्छा, आज कंपनी में HR से साहब आए थे या मैडम आई थी, उन्होंने ये बताया हमको. 3-4 साल के बाद wealth creation होगा and all the stuff. But then when the family will ask them questions,
They have follow-up questions.
they are blank.
Right.
कुछ तो बोला था. Let me go back. And clear instructions to everybody. And here the challenge was, again, telling each and every person, guys, if any question come to you, don't answer. Let those questions be routed back to HR. Because the managers are also not aware about it. They were also trying to understand, except for barring those few managers who had joined from these listed companies where they had got stock options. So their knowledge would be only at the receiving ends. So that's where the communication comes in. Major challenge comes is, how do we track about what is the growth progress going? Because there is no tickling stock ki aaj ka rate kya hai. Valuation, fair market valuations would happen after a certain period of time, after an interval of once a quarter, once in 6 months. We do once in 6 months. Till that time, managing. Achha, kya ho raha hai? And automotive industry is completely driven by sales, and those sales numbers are driven by all the festive seasons. Festive seasons out, the sales has gone down this month as compared to previous month.
Yes.
Has our stock price gone down? So valuation abhi kiya nahi hai. We are yet to. And these questions don't come from the shop floor. Managers, general managers, they ask us. I said, we've told you, 6 months, hold on, be patient. So that's the crux. I mean, very important part is communication, follow-up communication, and not going back, especially for an unlisted company, not sitting back and relaxing. दे दिया है मैंने, अब 3 साल के बाद वापस communication करना है. No, there has to be a follow-through communication so that people don't get misguided or misquote things, and juniors would get misguided.
Okay. Thanks everyone for going deep and sharing your insights. We I think have a couple of minutes. Request each of you to give one key insight of which you want to share. Regarding anything which you want to pick. And I think you shared quite a bit, but one key insight if you want to share from your person on the performance-based plans.
I think, as I said, I mean, clarity, being able to articulate from a company standpoint on why a particular design, right? And why a particular PSU plan, what are the measures, tying it to the culture and the company strategy, and being able to articulate it right at the executive leadership level. And what are you doing at the executive leadership level? Because it's you at the executive leadership level, we give grants year on year, right, to everybody at that level. So it's really part of their compensation, and it's therefore a significant part of their compensation. And the whole performance focused co-ownership is really driven there. At levels below, it's really a reward grant over and above their compensation, right? So how do you articulate that? And I think Subhalakshmi touched upon that, right? In that sense, right? At the levels below, how do you articulate that it's a reward grant? It's over and above your compensation. It's really about recognition or recognizing your top performers, right? But it's also creating the fact that these are our set of future leaders, and we want them to really see the upside and wealth creation along with us, right? So how do you retain, consistently reward a set of key talent cohorts? So the definition of key talent cohorts within the organization. Who do you reward? Why are you rewarding them? And really focusing on how do you, constantly communicate the performance measures, etc. So I think those two are very, very important. Communication, as I said, it's another thing that is really, really underlying, right, to everything that you do. And Yeshwinder touched upon a very, very interesting piece, I would say, is that, people expect ki I have given you a grant, I should get the stocks in my demat account. Why do I have to even pay money, right? So at lower levels, we give RSUs, but at a certain level and above, we give PSUs, right? So there has to be a certain amount of distinction between, and PSUs are performance-linked RSUs itself. So it's RSUs, but it's performance-linked, right? But people want to say, you've given me a grant, please credit it to my demat account after 1 year, right? So what avenues do you give, why do I have to pay money, right? So what sort of avenues do you have from an administrative perspective? Do you have a cashless process available so that employees, if they don't want to pay cash, you have a cashless option to exercise? So many of these nuances really holistically goes into what you call as the employee experience, right? And we use Qapita as a platform. And I keep saying this, that employee experience is a core and heart of it. And how do you make the whole user experience and the journey? And you have to reinvent yourself year on year, right? So that's what I would say.
Like you mentioned, Superna, that it's both art and a science. I think the science part is pretty templatized, what we are designing the scheme for, who are participants, what are the metrics, how do you measure, how do you reward, etc. Art is the communication. And a lot of it is depending on how well we can communicate and articulate what the objective or the philosophy behind is. And thanks for, giving us cues in terms of how simplified the communication can be and the kind of questions that can come. I can relate to that. And especially a lot of communications that came to us, we were bombarded with questions when the merger happened with HDFC Limited. And that was quite an eye-opener for me personally, because the companies were different, right? The parent company acquisition or merger, or however we term it, it's very different. So gone through the experience, but if it is templatized and thought through, and participative design is very important, because what HR can think, finance thinks very differently, leadership thinks very differently, and everybody has a skin in the game, right? So if it's designed collaboratively, I think it can give the desired outcome, and it can create magic.
I think both Superna and Subhalakshmi have said everything. I'll just add one point in the interest of time. That is, and more to do with unlisted companies, again, out of my experience in unlisted company. When you define the P of performance, as unlisted companies, make sure that those are realistic performance-oriented targets rather than taking too aggressive targets. Because if those targets are something which employees feel that these performance targets are not something which are realistic. Even if I work 24 hours a day, there are 99% chances the entire plan fails right on day one. The targets have to be, yes, I'm not saying have to be below the level, but have to be realistic targets set on performance, which employees know that yes, we participate, we become part of the organization as owners, co-owners of the organization, and we'll be able to achieve it. That would be the crux, in addition to, of course, communication and the entire other recommendations given.
I think if I have to summarize, it's 2 points. I think it's just the transparent communication and the realistic targets. If you put the performance plans, I think these are the 2 critical things to be taken care of. These performance plans if they need to be successful. I think we time is up. I think thank you all to the panelists and thanks for this engaging session. Thank you all.
A couple of questions, if anyone may have questions. I think there are 2. Jin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think fantastic insights and quite a learning for me. So I have a question, not in fact a question, but a view from the panel that I would like to understand is, when you grant options in the past, right? So there is a particular quantum that you grant option in the past, and now there's a grant to make, which may not be as, I would say quantified with respect to what you have granted in the past. So how would you still make a statement when you talk about communicating with employees that this is still attractive? Or how do you ensure that this is still attractive for employees who have received grant in the past, that maybe 10x, and now they're receiving 2x because definitely the share prices have gone up? How do you communicate they are still attractive for them?
Can I attempt? Okay. So when we look at grant quantum, it's a quantum of rupees, lakhs or crores or whatever, thousands, whatever. The number of shares is determined by dividing that with the Black-Scholes. So when we communicate, it's easier to communicate. Actually, it's more transparent to communicate both. It's easier to communicate the value, though it doesn't really probably land on the same number of shares because Black-Scholes may have gone up eventually, right? So, I mean, again, it's an art how to communicate. Whether you want to communicate the number of shares and talk about the upside, or you want to communicate the amount that is given to the employee, which is a relation with the fixed compensation or a short-term incentive or an absolute amount, whichever it is. So we'll have to figure a balance, be transparent, but if it's less, then there is a reason why it is less, and it's always good to tell employees why it is less. And we do that, and we do that constantly, so that it's absolute transparency in the communication.
Sure. Thank you, Subhalakshmi, for sharing your views. I think this is a regular challenge what we also face as an organization. The grants which we made 5 years ago and the grants which we are proposing to make now, maybe the next year, may not have that kind of quantum. And employees who have seen that in the past may not see that kind of an upside, and which is why it may not be as attractive as it was in the past. So that's why the question came to me, and I thought I'll just put it up to the panel.
Can't make everybody happy. I mean, they have to be a part of the organization. The organization can pay up to a certain extent. There is a reason why it is so. They have to accept if they believe they belong to the organization.
Yeah, that's
because their actions write the outcome, right?
It looks like it's a universal problem with everybody.
Skin in the game, right?
It is, and sometimes, I mean, I don't know, if you really have to evaluate your equity instrument depending on where you are on your journey. That's also a critical point and a discussion that you have to bring it in front of your leadership. Do you want to still stay with your options? Do you want to consider RSUs? Do you want to consider RSUs linked to performance? All these are relevant discussions and in a company's lifetime, right? So that's a critical juncture, and these conversation has to be had at those right junctures.
Yeah, thank you for the session. I'm Ajay Malik from ITC. I have a question about designing or arriving at the performance criteria for vesting for equity LTI versus the short-term incentives. What are the panel's view, if anyone can answer? What to what extent should there be overlap or a differentiation between the performance criteria for short-term incentives and the long-term incentives?
So I think even during the discussion, this topic did come up about alignment of the short-term goals versus the long-term goals. And that's why it is long-term incentive. Typically, stock options are considered to be long-term incentives. Now, if both of these are not aligned, you will never reach to the goal. So there has to be a proper balance. The short-term incentives or the short-term goals, you can say, they are basically the milestones to reach to that final visionary long-term goal. If those milestones are not in line, if I have to travel from here to Delhi and I keep a milestone going to Hyderabad, Chennai, I will reach Delhi late. I need to make sure that my milestones to reach to Delhi will be in line with reaching Delhi fastest. If the road conditions are not good, I may still have to look out at the fastest route, not the shortest route, the fastest route. So that alignment is actually the job of the committee which works on it, the team which works on it. And of course, you have to make sure that that decision goes through the executive committee, remuneration committee, and the board, everything out.
See, the metrics can be company dependent, industry dependent, specific company dependent, and the targets are designed by the management of the company. Conceptually, short-term and long-term incentive metrics, they coexist. And individual metrics as well. What the balance scorecard says versus what the group incentive can be versus what the organization criteria can be, they can all coexist. And what to reward with what periodicity and what tenure is what is going to drive between the short-term and the long-term incentive.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the questions. I think they were giving some directions in terms of how do you align short-term and long-term, but Lakshman, I would want you to felicitate